Good afternoon. All right, come on in, folks. We won't hurt you. Come have a seat. My name is Ray Goulbourne. I'm the EVP, Executive Vice President, Media Sales at BET, Paramount. And up here we have, from my left, Kirk McDonald, the CEO of GroupM. For those of you who are not familiar, GroupM is one of the major agencies, holding companies in the world.
What, about North 16? America, though. Let's be clear. Don't give me all the whole thing.
No, it's the world. He's CEO of North America. About $16 billion under management. About 7,000 plus almost employees. And Kirk is founding member of Becca. All around, avant-garde, innovator, bad guy, superstar, former global marketer. You name it, Kirk McDonald, it leads innovation and all the things that are necessary to keep a major holding company in North America all on target. So, Kirk, please give a round of applause to Kirk. Kirk McDonald, please. All right. And then right beside Kirk with the, you can't miss her. She is a wave maker. She's a superstar. I've known her for about 30 years, 20-some years at least.
Neither of you guys are that old.
I started too, Bob. So, Esi Eggleston Bracey is president of Unilever North America. She's also CEO of Personal Care Unilever North America. She is an innovator, started, of course, the Crown, responsible for the Crown Act, which is about really making sure that your natural hair is not used to discriminate against you. Probably in about almost 25 different states, it's been passed as law. She is responsible for pretty much most of Unilever's business, and she is a superstar. Please welcome Esi Eggleston Bracey. And of course, my CEO, Paramount Global CEO, I've known him now for 20 years, some like that. I started too. Bob Bakish has been our CEO for a decade plus. He runs all streaming strategy, global revenue streams, you name it, for Paramount Global. He is responsible for thousands or 13,000 employees globally. He just came back from Rome. Of course, you've all seen the last Top Dog, Top Gun, and now he's doing, what is it now, Mission Impossible 7 out of Rome. So please welcome one of the leading global streaming service CEO in the world, Bob Bakish, Paramount.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. So I see some folks out here. Esther, good to see you. Byron Allen, good to see you. Janine, a lot of great talent out here. We're going to leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions, so feel free to ask. But let's jump on into it. Kirk, AC, Bob, it's been 3 years since George Floyd. Brands have pledged a lot of things. Some brands have not pledged, but we have the good guys, we have the bad guys, we have some folks who are moving the movement along by actions, by certain key pronouncements in some cases. But really, what do you think is the responsibility of your brand to help in this mission fight as we move forward into the 21st century? I know, Kurt, you speak differently because you've got a portfolio of brands. Bob and AC, you've got a brand or several different brands, but you speak differently. I'd love to hear your different perspective. So first, what is it that you're doing, and what is it you'd like to do? And we'll start with you, Bob, and then we'll go to AC and Kirk.
Sure. Well, George Floyd was certainly a moment that can't be understated, but for us, our journey around inclusion has been one that started really years ago. For me, it started working for a guy named Tom Freston, who was a big believer in has come to be known as DE&I. And it's certainly a focus of our organization today. And it is for a very simple reason, which is you could argue it's the right thing to do, but at the core, it's good for business because as Paramount, we serve diverse audiences on a global basis, and therefore, our ability to do so is enhanced by having a diverse workforce in front of the camera, behind the camera, creatively, commercially, transactionally, et cetera. So, that's how we look at it. And I think, I'm sure we talk about, we've done a lot of good work in the area. We have more work to do. But if you think about our company, we're one of the few companies in the world, or certainly in the U.S., that has over 50% female board. We have an SLT that is a little over 20% ethnically diverse, a little around 40% female. If you look at our employee base writ large, it's about 40% ethnically diverse and about just under 50% female. So, we've done a lot of work. And again, we think it just fundamentally makes sense for our business.
Thank you. AC.
Hello. If we're real, George Floyd was not the catalyst, it was the tipping point. Okay? Because what you saw from George Floyd was America, the world got to see what so many Black Americans and underserved groups had experienced. So as you think about what our responsibility is, and I want to almost say ditto to what Bob said, it's about using that tipping point to accelerate what we already started, right? And so, that's of course what we've done at Unilever. And what you see companies distinguish themselves, those that made platitudes based on George Floyd, or those that actually took action to accelerate what they'd already been doing. Because what you need in this fight and effort is consistency. I remind people that Black Americans in particular, our genesis of America started 400 years ago as slavery. So if we look at the time that we've been here in America, 60% of that we were slaves. 25% of that we didn't have civil rights. It's only 15% of the time that we've been here that we have actually been considered equal in terms of the law. So the work that we have to do, we did not get into this situation overnight. We will not get out of it. So it's not like George Floyd is a one and done. You need to set a commitment based on the business case, as Bob talked, which you believe deeply in. America is changing, the world is changing. It's the browning. America in particular, 40% of people today are people of color. So if you're going to have a business that's going to exist, you have to have a business that is relevant for the people of color. So back to the tipping point. So for us, it's all about continuing the journey. At Unilever, we aspire to be the most diverse and inclusive company in the world. And so we've taken actions for females of gender parity, which we've achieved. Okay, we've certainly done that in North America. My leadership team has 40% people of color. So we're taking actions. And since George Floyd, we've actually celebrated the presence of blacks in leadership by almost 7%. So it's all about taking actions and using it as a catalyst, the tipping point, using it as the tipping point to accelerate, not as the beginning of something, and each and every year making consistent progress, given its centuries that we are of oppression that we're trying to unravel.
Thank you. Kirk.
So I want to compliment both of these business leaders for the work they're doing. Agents and agencies act as enablers or an intermediary often between what a brand needs to accomplish and the work itself. So our role is to, one, make sure that we live up to the same commitments that we're asking our clients to, but also show them a pathway there. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and I love the description Esi's described, which is that George Floyd was a tipping point because the moment was so visceral, so emotive, so in your face that at least the conversations that happened all after that all had to have some similar, if not exact same perspective on what that meant, and then some difficult conversations happened and allowed work that had started to accelerate for sure. Decisions about putting more diversity in the boardroom, more gender and ethnic diversity at the management table, to make sure that you start measuring all of these promises, measuring them to a standard that you know is scalable, something that can actually sustain itself over time. All of those things came out of the moment. I truly think that steps here are still holding ourselves accountable for those things. Similar to both Paramount and Unilever, we've made commitments across all of WPP and GroupM to our behavior around our leadership and staff. But it's the simple things, too, that you've got to do, right? Removing unconscious bias in your hiring practice. For us, you hear about us talking about this work with the ad counts around tear the paper ceiling. It's a simple step of removing college degree requirements for you to actually hire an entry-level staff. Turns out the unconscious bias in that system is that you end up hiring more people from the same universities. You can't diversify the entry-level workforce. By not doing that, you then claim to have a pipeline problem when you're looking for middle management and senior leaders of diverse backgrounds. Little things like that are all the steps that need to be made along the way, because it isn't going to be one single thing that makes this work. It's a collection of actions and a true change in behavior. We stood up for our clients the Media Inclusion Initiative that said, don't just target the fact that America's browning, but target the creators of content, making sure that black creators, diverse creators also themselves would see the kind of investment to be able to invest in their properties and grow. And we set that as sort of a flag out there, and we asked clients to step up and stand behind it. Unilever and others have stepped up to that and said, not only do we want to hit that mark, we've set higher standards for ourselves around what we think our company is going to do. And as Bob described, I love the fact that these things are not just being done for social good, but they're being done for business good. Because if you can make it make business sense, it stays making sense. That's the deal.
What a wonderful answer. Here's what I'd put in front of folks. I said yesterday to Mark Pritchard, that's a very logical explanation for what's in front. But there's a lot of emotion in there too, because you're talking about people, you're talking about culture, you're speaking about backgrounds, association over many years. How do you deal with that portion of it, Bob, knowing full well that the future is bright, but you can't really go back, and you have folks who are not prepared necessarily to handle the future because they don't have the competencies, whether culturally or otherwise? How do you deal with that? I'd love to hear your thoughts, AC, Bob, and Kirk.
Yeah, sure. So I say a couple things. I think it starts with commitment, and again, a firm rationale for that commitment, which is it makes business sense. Because as Kirk said, if it didn't ultimately make business sense, it will be hard to perpetuate. But it does, and we firmly believe that. So it starts with a commitment, and we're big believers, maybe because we're a media company, but in communications. So once you understand what you want to do, you have to have the team understand it, and then put objectives in place, because, I don't know who invented the saying, what gets measured gets done. So this is a similar kind of thing. You want to understand what your objectives are. And then you go to work on specific areas, whether it's in front of the screen, a lot of work we're doing around content for change, and we can come around and talk about that. Whether it's about understanding what's going on in the production process, and we developed a partnership with Salesforce to use their software in a obviously bespoke way, to understand what was actually going into our productions. And by the way, we've opened that up to the industry. And then I could go on and saying, how we're monitoring other aspects of the business. But it's objective, communications, process, measurements. In many respects, it's not like any other business problem. It's like you got to go at it in a systematic way. And again, as we've done that, we've certainly moved the needle some. Again, I wouldn't say we're done. But it can have a real impact, and it's also working for business. I can tell you, you mentioned Mark Pritchard. I know Mark, I'm going to see him tomorrow, and part of the reason he does business with us is what we're doing on the screen and off the screen. And you know, and Louis knows, and I've built a great relationship on that. So that's how we think about it. We really do, even though you could say it's a social issue, we look at it like any other business challenge and moving an organization forward and building culture, et cetera. And I'd say one other thing, as an example, because we're at Cannes Lion, and Cannes Lion is the festival of creativity, but creativity is related to advertising. So if you look at our ad sales force, I think in the last 2 years, we've changed the way we brought people into the company. What we call SSEs and planners. We've now brought through 4 different cohorts. So we set them up as groups that come in, 150 people, including changing the requirements to bring them in. They don't all look the same on paper. And it's significantly transformed what our ad sales force looks like. Hasn't made it all the way up to the top yet, because it's cohorts of people coming in, but you're talking about 150 people on our ad sales force. And by the way, I think I probably shouldn't say this because I'm probably wrong, but I actually don't think any of them have left. The retention on it's been very strong, and I'm sure the promotion on it will be as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Esi.
I think what your question is really an important one. And what I heard your question is it just about the facts and about the business case?
Absolutely.
And for me, I liken it to any change. What's it take to drive a change? And I say it's your head and it's your heart and it's your soul. If I think about your soul, it's belief in the mission, in the purpose of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the business culture. So you have to believe. Unilever is a company of purposeful brands, of Dove, of Shea Moisture. We believe in brands with purpose. The company is one of purpose, so we declare that purpose and mission, so we believe in it. Then your heart is you have to feel it. And back to the point of being at the Cannes Festival, that's where making sure you've got authentic, real representations of black people, and not just black people, brown people, LGBTQ people, people that may not be in your sphere. You've got to see, you've got to feel, you have to have a horse in the race. That's why George Floyd's murder was such an eye-opener, because you felt it, you saw it. Then you got to have the case for it, because we are talking about the numbers in the business. But I do agree that not any one of those alone is sufficient. You need them all, right? So that's why the work on creating authentic content, the work we did during the aftermath of George Floyd's murder around courageous conversations, where we got to tell our personal stories. Got to tell my story. What is it like to come in this corporate America with a costume and an armor on every day? What does it feel like? That creates heart. And then, of course, it's the business case, because our businesses will not exist if we don't create the connectivity. So the short answer is yes, it is about more than the numbers. If not, we can't drive change. And any other change has been about more than the facts. The civil rights movement was about more than the facts. And I can think of so many more that are about more than the facts.
Before you go, Kurt,
I'm not going after that. After Bob and her, I'm not going.
All right, I'll have an interlude for you then.
So you need another question.
Right,
I'm not trying to go after that.
Yeah, that's too hard to follow. But before you go, you both run enormous companies with diversified employees, but majority of which are white folks from the general market. How do you deal with that emotions where folks are feeling that if one group is winning, the other group is losing? Because that's a real thing, right? And we shouldn't just disregard that, because the connection is important. It's important for you, Bob, with your employees, Kurt, Esi. So how do you deal with that from the perspective of the logical business case, but at the same time understand that you need to change, but also you need to incorporate some of the past with some of the present as you go to the future?
So this is where I think it is critically important that it tests whether or not you believe or have DE&I policies and understand what it really means to do that. And the reason I use DE&I, where I rarely ever use it in that order, is because if you don't, like Bob said earlier, start with the I, which is, are you truly creating an inclusive environment? You never get to the D. Because see, D before the I is a false metric, and eventually people don't retain.
Smart. Yeah.
They churn out of the organization. So you think you're solving D, but you have not solved for people sitting in the organization. Bob said it well. Esi said it before. The way you make sure that no one feels left behind, no group, and then you can talk about any group, is that you speak about an inclusive culture. And a culture that recognizes that we don't exist until the new person comes in. And every new person that comes on board contributes equally to the culture, to the person that's there 25 years. And if the 25-year veteran and the person who's on day 3 both feel equal, so I, inclusive environment, feel that they've been given equitable opportunity for voice, pay reward, experiences to be felt, opportunity to contribute. Diversity then happens as a result of that. And if you go IED in your philosophy with your people department and the way you communicate it to your teams, that's how no group starts feeling, but why are you giving them more attention than me? Because they recognize that we collectively are actually ones making the change and doing it different. I'm not telling you it's easy. This is a journey, and we're on that with our teams, but that's how we are trying to get 7,000 people to feel like one body, one group, one movement, while still retaining all the individuality that my Shalom group, my AAPI group has, that my Black ERGs have. Everyone should have their own sensibility, but still believe that they're included in a single environment that is welcoming of the new.
Yeah, and I would just add a few things. I want to say, like, triple that emotion. And in that, to add, we have Tish Archie-Oliver here, who is for Unilever's head of diversity, equity, inclusion,
Tish.
and belonging. So I wanted to call her out. She's doing incredible work. But I want to add to Kurt 3 things. One is the B. So he talked about the I. That is, we can't just show up as numbers. It's not going to work because friction happens, not magic. So when you get representation without the feeling of inclusion, that I'm a part of the conversation and that I belong here, that I'm not a number. And while I call out Tish because of the belonging, she's really brought that belonging piece to Unilever, that I belong. Not just that I'm in the conversation. This is my Unilever. I belong. It's a game changer, and you have people working together. Number 2, back to the earlier conversation, how do you deal with the win, you win, I lose? There's 2 things in that. One is growth mindset. We talk about that in the business all the time. It's rewarding in everything you do, expansion. It's about a growth mindset. We have to do that in our businesses today. It is harder than ever to fight for growth. So we have to be expansive. And that's the same when we think about people. The other thing, it's about being related. So I think the women's movement has made more progress than the ethnic diversity movement. Why is that? Because men who own the power have girls that they don't want to grow up in this world with the same level of oppression that was accepted. So they fought for the change and were included. So how do we change that for all people? And we see that happen with the LGBTQ plus movement. It's my neighbor, it's my friend, it's my brother, it's my sister. So we need to create relatedness so that it doesn't feel like it's about me, it's about them, it's about us. So I think those are the things we have to do. And your mic drop on the I plus the B, the growth mindset and the relatedness. So this is our world, not their world or, you against me.
Beautiful. Love it. Bob, love to hear your thoughts on that, please.
So I agree with everything that's been said, but I would add to that it's part of a broader thing, which is it's often said today the only constant is change. And that is a statement that doesn't only apply to the topic we're talking about. It applies to business writ large. Our jobs are to lead our respective companies through a changing environment. And so that almost definitively means the status quo won't perpetuate itself. The organization is going to change. And the reason we're changing the companies, and you can use words like transformation and all that stuff, it's fundamentally, talk about your growth point, but it's we want to make the companies stronger. We want them to thrive in the 21st century. For us, for probably everyone in this room, is affected by the transition of consumer behavior and media consumption and linear versus streaming and all that. that has tremendous implications for our companies. And it means that we need to make sure people understand what we're trying to achieve, back to that point, and understand that we want to transform to be stronger. And in that transformation, there will be change. I don't want to call it winners and losers, but we certainly move resources around from this kind of resource to that kind of resource. And ultimately, it's the ones that are stay behind, i.e. stay with the company, that need to be focused on this transition. Because there will be, inevitably, and you just read the headlines, there are people dislocated by change in general. Forget about DE&I. And the important are the people that continue through it and drive forward. Because they're part of making the company stronger. They have to understand what we're doing and help carry the torch in general and including with respect to DE&I. Because that's what it's all about. This is not the only change we're managing. Our job is to manage change and bring the workforce along.
Beautiful. Let's switch it up a little bit and talk about investments. You know, there's no real opportunity that's going to open up for anyone without real investment in infrastructure, whether it's human infrastructure or otherwise. You're a content leader. You are a content leader / procurer. You have all of those things opened up. Let's talk a little bit about how you view the notion of investing in either black or LGBTQ targeted opportunities or owned. And I'd love to hear, you've got Tyler Perry as a huge part of our Paramount and other African-American procurers and content creators. You've done lots of different partnerships. Kurt, you lead a global North American entity that does that all the time. Would love to hear your different perspective in how you move those investments to either black-owned, black-operated, and what are some of the criteria that you use in order to differentiate that, other than just like it's good?
Well, go back to the fundamental point that we serve diverse audiences, including black audiences, right? Point one. Point two is, to do that well, we believe, and I think it has been proven correct, that you need diverse teams. Point three is go to the creative side. So as we looked at it, we said, where are there opportunities? You mentioned Tyler Perry. Scott Mills and I did the Tyler Perry deal. It was Scott's idea. But as we looked at it and as we wanted to be successful serving audiences, we said, this is an outstanding creative partner. In order to align it, because he was working with another company, so we need to align him with our company, we had to commit certain resources, i.e. invest, a size of a slate, et cetera, a multi-year commitment. But it was a commitment that we believed in based on understanding the audience we were going after. That's one example. Much more recent examples when we set up BET Studios, and as part of that, we said we're going to offer the marketplace a new model. We're not just going to write a check. We're going to offer an opportunity for, in this case, black creators to own equity in part of a larger operation. And we thought that was differentiating for us, and it would serve to attract talent, which in turn would help drive our success. And we're at the early stages of that because we only set that up, a year ago, 2 years ago? Maybe longer than that. But it's totally worked. And it goes back to thinking, what are you trying to achieve? And based on that, where do you think you should invest? And then over time, how do you gauge if your investment is successful? That's the other thing, but it's part of it. You have to invest for success.
Thank you. Kirk?
Sure. So again, I applaud the approach Bob's taken. When we went out and stood up the Media Inclusion Initiative, which you may have seen in press, and it spoke about a 2+% pledge by marketers, advertisers of their investment or their advertising dollars intentionally now invested. It was only part of the program. Remember, for us, we started this, as Esi said, George Floyd was a tipping point, but we've had programs back as early as 2017, 2018, 2019. There were new majority ready coming into and out of the census. Let's actually prepare our marketers to understand. New majority ready formed a coalition of advertisers who wanted to understand what the browning of America meant. That was followed by tools like multicultural marketplaces, which allowed for marketers to buy specific audiences in easy to buy ways. One of the frictions in buying media is the ability to find audiences efficiently, followed up by programs like the Media Inclusion Initiative. And the 2+% pledge said, look, for existing owned media properties that were owned by blacks, or in the case of it now, its evolution into diverse owned, we want to make sure dollars go to those owners, but it also had in it a Diverse Voices Accelerator, specifically targeted at black voices. The Black Voices Accelerator program recognizes that the structure of a media company like a Paramount or other media companies in our space, whether you want to look at Allen Media Group, right, or you want to look at Univision in the Latina space, you want to look at Black Enterprise, all of those are owned entities, but in the future, you may have individual voices, individual creators that are coming up through other methods, and we wanted to make sure that dollars got intentionally spent with them, knowing that they should get investment so that they could grow what they're doing and keep telling their stories. We recognize there's an importance to who tells what story to what audience. And it's not, again, one versus the others. It's not a game of one way is better than the other. All should exist, and we have to be very intentional about making sure those dollars go that way. So as we stood that up, everyone that committed to the 2+% pledge also got themselves involved in our Diverse Voices Accelerator, making sure that, again, we are getting intentional dollars all the way down to individual social media contributors that want to make sure their stories get out there and told as well.
Wonderful. Before I go to Esi, on the prior question, how does the NBC Universal deal fit into that model that you just described? I'd love to hear that, Kirk.
The question is to me about the NBC Universal deal?
And how it fits into what you just described. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that perspective.
Be specific. Which deal are we talking about?
Okay, excuse me. The one where they're going to commingle and sell the African American content.
You mean the Group Black deal?
The Group Black deal.
Got it.
Excuse me.
So no worries. So for those who have not read the press, it was announced this week, and I don't have much more information than you do other than what's in the press.
Thank
but
you.
As I understand, between Group Black, another black-owned media property, they've gotten into an arrangement with NBC Universal to make sure that they will have an ability to represent inventory of content that is targeted against black audiences. And as I read it, some major portion or the majority of the revenue from that goes back into Group Black, and Group Black structure is about making sure that money gets eventually disseminated down to creators. I think it's not an either or. That was the point I made earlier, right? So I think if we said that was the only way we're going to work forward, that would be as egregious and as wrong as imagining that what we were doing right before without having intentionality was good. So this too is good. I do think that it shouldn't be, we have to be careful that we don't compare all of these things all the time and use that as a reason to imagine, for example, that BET, under its current ownership, should not also participate in these types of programs. What we want to make sure is happening is that we are not ignoring the challenges faced by black ownership or diverse ownership, or black creators and diverse creators in their ability to get their stories told, and more importantly, distributed at enough scale where they can actually monetize and then be able to reinvest in their business.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, Esi?
Your question was about investment, which is, I think, is complicated. So one, you have to have the intention. We keep talking about the business case. It is so obvious that you need to overinvest in black and brown. If I think about Unilever's and our beauty business in particular, all of the growth in beauty is coming from black and brown consumers. I'm more specific in my category. 60% of the growth is coming from black and brown consumers. We consume more than average because we're into our beauty. There are unique needs for melanin skin and textured hair. And because of that, they disproportionately consume our categories. So we have to overinvest. The other thing is that black and brown, the data, no matter how you slice it, are influencers. So beyond the consumption that we have, it's we influence others. So, I always say spin to the business. The investment case is very clear. So the intention is there to overinvest. But then you have to ask yourself, so why isn't that happening today? What are the barriers to that? And I think there are a couple of things. One is the capability, making sure people know how to plan and et cetera, to reach in terms of investment. It's not just in media, it's in the right authentic content. Because if you're investing in media and the content's not right and it's not resonating, that's not going to work. So you got to have the capability. That's where the training, demanding of agencies, our media partners, et cetera, to not take content that's meant for one audience and place it in media that's meant for another. So there's a whole capability piece that's a disconnect that we have to work on. And then the third is operationalizing it so it's not a one and done, which is what these gentlemen are talking about here, is the whole ecosystem. Tyler is an ecosystem to create and perpetuate that content. And that's in front of the camera, behind the camera, having the right diversity of media available so that the investment goes to where we intend it to go, right? So I think that's why I say it's complex. We have to have the intention, but we have to build that whole ecosystem with the right capability and operationalizing it to really create the breakthrough. And we're still in that journey. Some of it is changing mindsets to solidify more broadly that intention, but we are building the capability in the ecosystem to operationalize it and sustain it.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're winding down. It seems like the hour is going by quickly. I'd like to take two questions from the audience. I see folks are jumping in up already. Come on, if you could come on up, and I'll give you my mic, but just two questions, and then we'll wind down a little bit. First of all, what's your name? Please.
Hi, I'm Monique with TED Talks. My question is, I want to lift up under the hood about the action portion and equity. So one of the things that I want to go beyond is just equity and pay. One thing that really helped me from growing with my career was sponsorship. So understanding how to navigate being in those rooms where we want a seat at the table, because they'll let us into the table sometimes, but they won't necessarily show us how to operate and have a voice. And also really thinking about how do you elevate your skill set when you're trying to accelerate within your career. How are you all looking to implement sponsorship, action-oriented ways for people of color, Black people, to understand how to operate in these spaces? Because it goes beyond just being in the spaces. You have to really know how to navigate it.
Terrific question. Bob?
Well, I think there's really a multifaceted answer to that. It goes back to the notion of inclusion, and the value of having diverse voices in the room as you search for great creative answers, commercial answers, et cetera. I say in the room because that is fundamental. You need to have, and I'm a big believer in listening. I hate rooms where the senior people do all the talking. You've got to listen to what people think in order to collect the information, and that includes diverse voices. The second thing I would say, and this is super important, is ultimately it is also on you, which is when you get in a room, you need to be prepped for being in the room. You need to do the thinking. You need to have a point of view. I love to hear people's point of view, but if you can't explain why you believe what you believe, that's a missed opportunity. So it goes to, there are hustlers and not hustlers out there, and it goes to the value of, dare I say, being in the office. Like, people need to invest in themselves. When I talk to people, and we've been fairly successful at bringing people back to the office. We've adopted hybrid, 2 days a week, et cetera, which I think is a good balance. But when we talk about it, I'm saying, you're not doing it for me. Believe it or not, you're doing it for you. Because social interaction helps you learn, and learning makes you stronger and makes you contribute. So sure, we have to give the opportunities. We have to bring the right people in the door. Goes to the ad sales example I gave. We've got to put the people in the room, but they've got a responsibility too. they've got to invest in themselves. They've got to read. They've got to learn the business. They've got to talk to people. Building networks is important. And there are networks out there, and people embrace it. Mentorship is something we're doing. But I just want to stress, it's not all on us. It really is a two-way street. We've got to open the door, but you've got to work on it too. And as you do, great things can happen and do happen.
Thank you. Ace?
Oh, I have a lot to say about this topic. What a great question. What a great question. So there's three things that come to mind to me. One, I have a question for you. Who thinks sponsorship and mentorship are the same? Nobody. Okay. So I completely agree with you that I have benefited more from sponsors than I have mentors. And there are people that put me in my position because they chose to put me in their position and they took action. I've had lots of people that have given me advice, but I've had a select few people that believed in me and said, this is where I see you. Not just here's the next role, here's where I see you. And they made active changes to put me in these breakthrough roles that were game changers for me. I can tell you, 5 of those roles that made a huge difference because of a sponsor. So I think you're right on. The second part of your question in my statement is around your question was, how are you sponsoring? And I think what's really important is how I sponsor and the way Bob sponsors has to be different. And you say, why does it have to be different? People have different kind of expectations of us. When I come into a room, people are afraid that I'm going to populate everybody with black people. Okay. The way Bob can show up, he can be active sponsoring a black person, and they see that as, oh, there must be something special about this black person. They see me do that, they're like, she's trying to get all her friends in the room. Okay, so the way I have to show up as a sponsor is I show up, you hear, with this head, heart, soul, with the business case, what the person's facts are, the way I have to sponsor. And I'm a very, very active sponsor and champion for underserved people, deserving underserved people in my organization. So I can tell you, he talked about the Crown Act, how I sponsored. When I joined Unilever in 2018, Dove, which is the brand that has pioneered the Crown Act, was a company and a brand all about beauty inclusivity. But I showed up and said, beauty inclusivity, let's look at what that means for black women. And so I showed up as a sponsor of that movement, brought in an agency as a sponsor of that movement. Not me, but an agency to come in and say, how do we do this? And then continue to actively sponsor that movement. So today, we have 23 states, as he said, who have passed some kind of anti-race discrimination legislation. I actively sponsored that movement. And how did I do that? It wasn't about me. It was about extending Dove's mission, understanding the highest consumption group, and then understanding barriers to beauty inclusivity and being able to use my position to actively sponsor that movement. If I weren't in my position, that movement could not have happened because it took a lot of change. That's an example of sponsorship. The third thing I would say is making sure you have a model that systematizes sponsorship. So I always use a model called GRASP, to get a grasp on diversity. G, set goals. R is recognition, recognize and reward, recognition. A is active advocacy. All of us can be that. S is sponsorship, sponsorship, sponsorship. And P is have a plan. So recognizing sponsorship is important, not just mentorship. So well said. Those are my thoughts.
Your question was so good I'd take my glasses off. +1 to everything you've heard. Also, I want to applaud those that are looking to find scale ways to do this as well, too. Adrian, Inkwell, group black people that are sponsored here. Have you guys seen these young people around here? The Clan Collective, these young men. This is Alexander right here, standing right over here in this shirt. Y'all see that dude? He's at a HBCU. Him and Miles stopped me on the street. Miles, put your hand up. And they stopped me on the street. Now, if we do more programs like this, they're going to get exposure. Now, they walked up and introduced themselves, and I remembered their names. And that matters more to me than they understand, because I know they're the future leaders. We are part of an organization called BECA, Black Executive C-Suite Executive Alliance, right? What we stood up was we got together and said, how do we make sure that we're preparing future leaders for our jobs, even as we're thinking about board seats, et cetera, and things like that? And what can we do to actually actively invest in the community of leaders that are coming behind us and give them these kind of tips so that they don't have to actually stumble over the stuff we stumbled over. That's all it is sometimes. It's just don't make the mistake I made the first time I got in the room, either with or without a sponsor. And when possible, I'm going to remember Alex and Miles, because if the opportunity exists for me to sponsor and I don't sponsor them, that would be a shameful thing. But that's the start work that needs to get done, and everyone can be active in that one. Everyone can participate. Go meet every single future leader in this room. Every person who's in this room is a future leader. Raise your hand now, either of Becca or the Can Collective. And if you're an executive in this room and you don't walk out of here having met one of them and said hello, and given them your direct cell phone number and email for you to be in touch with them, then you're not really committed to it either. You're all talk. All right? But that's the kind of work that needs to get done. See, I'd take my glasses off for that.
Wonderful.
Because that was
And I'm going to call out a couple of the folks that I didn't. We talked about Tiffany up here, Mr. Byron Allen, Pam Kaufman, Dario. You see them all around here. Go get their names and numbers and hit them up. All right? Not for money, but for future, all right? You got Ed Fogarty in the back. Those are the folks that you need to talk to, right? Steve Ellis. You got Michelle. You go
Michelle
find them.
Gee, you go, girl.
Go find them.
Michelle's hiring.
Right? You got Londell. He runs Prince's managing director of Prince's Estate. Go find them.
And y'all don't
right?
play. Byron Allen's right in the front row. Byron
Don't ask
can give
him
you all
for
a
a
job
loan.
just to give you a job.
I mean, you can ask Byron
Right,
for a
Byron?
loan, but
Ask
everybody
Byron.
else you ask
There you
for
go.
their numbers. All right? This is important. I think you'll all agree with me. This has been an awesome, wonderful panel. Kirk McDonald, CEO, North America GroupM. Esi Eggleston, President of Unilever USA, CEO, Personal Care. And Bob Bakish, Global CEO, Paramount. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.